Hello and welcome to this episode of Freelance Fridays Conversations. Just a little bit of an intro into Freelance Fridays. Firstly, my name is Adam Clements and I'm the Enterprise Manager at Teesside University within Launchpad. And Freelance Fridays is Teesside University's freelancer program that gives students and graduates the confidence to run their freelance businesses, whether it's remote or in person working with clients. Today's topic that we're going to look at is everything to do with email marketing, and we are joined by Alex Fearon, who is the founder of Maybe Later. And Alex, what would be great is if you can just give a bit of an introduction to yourself and what the business is.
Totally. So I'm Alex, and I run a creative email consultancy called Maybe Later. And we help purpose-led brands, so whether that's nonprofits or tech for goods, kind of turn email marketing into their most impactful marketing channel. And it's called Maybe Later. So I'm originally from South Africa, and we talk about time in three ways. So you're going to do something now, or now, or just now, and anything that's a now, or just now, or jobs that you keep putting off. And so when I went freelance in August 2020, I was like, what is like the British equivalent of the jobs that you put off, and what do you say? And it's a Maybe Later. And so I've worked in marketing for a decade, and I've found that all of the jobs like email marketing, strategy, like the big things that can move your business and your idea forward, always kind of get put to the bottom of a to-do list and are Maybe Laters. So yeah, I'm really passionate about helping making those bigger jobs more accessible and more joyful, because I think especially email, it can really free up a lot of time in your business, which I think is really important when you're just starting out.
Great. And you mentioned a couple of things there around the idea of now, which we in freelance, and a lot of the times we maybe don't focus on the now. We think about where we're going and what we're getting to, but now is obviously this building those steps. When you think back to your background that you mentioned, obviously 10 years in marketing, kind of what roles did you do that maybe weren't centered around email marketing, but has allowed you to get to where you are now?
Totally. So I actually studied something completely different, classic. I did politics and history, and I went and I interned for a non-profit, and they worked on kind of looking at like spatial equality and city planning. And obviously you need to really focus on communicating complex ideas in a simple way. So it had a lot of grant writing and strategy and comms. And then from there I went and I worked for a marketing agency, and social was a really big part of what I did then. It was kind of like Facebook's kind of like golden era where it was literally everything. And email still, it was just something that a lot of, I think, smaller businesses didn't focus on. And then I immigrated to the UK in August 2017. And initially decided I wanted budget, like I really wanted budget to play and be able to do big marketing things. And I worked for like a luxury tech brand, but my heart wasn't in it. And again, like email, it was always kind of bottom of the pile, I think, especially when you do anything that's like B2C and retail. And so I took a little moment, I was like, what actually drives me? And I really want to do work with organizations that are making the world a better place. So I then worked for a Northeast tech for good startup, and that role was more kind of digital strategy. And again, like email was just always kind of an afterthought. And when I went freelance, I was like, what's the thing where if I look at brands that I love and businesses who are doing really well, what does their marketing mix look like? And they don't put all of their eggs in social media. There's like a diversification there, and they use email really well, not just for sales, but for kind of storytelling and brand building. And so I was like, right, I want to, as kind of a freelancer, carve out a niche and be known for a particular thing. So that's where I decided to kind of focus on email. And I think for me, like the thing that I love so much about it is it's like combining data and storytelling. So you get amazing kind of customer and community insights, but there's also real space to be creative, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much.
Great. And there's so much to get into there, and I'm sure we will in this conversation. But fundamentally, one of the biggest things for me is around what you mentioned, that you were working for a corporate tech company, but you didn't necessarily believe in or have the drive or passion for what you do. How, from looking back from your career so far to date and what you do now, how much importance do you think passion is for the work that you do, whether it's employed or freelance?
I think it's massive, and I think it's only growing in importance for a younger kind of generation, whether that's Gen Z or millennial. I think it's like we want to work to enjoy the rest of our lives, right? But if work is really stressful or you're not passionate about it, like I firmly believe that it is going to impact how you show up in the world, your mental health. So for me, it's really important to be passionate and to also like spend a little bit of time figuring out like, what do I really care about? What are my values? So making sure that whether you're employed or going freelance, that you're building a career where you're surrounding yourself with a people or like an industry that align with those, because then I think like it drives you if you wake up in the morning and you go like, I want to do this and I'm excited by what I'm doing. But also like, it doesn't mean it's not going to be challenging. Yes. But again, if you're enjoying it, kind of you use those challenges and failures as an opportunity to ultimately learn and kind of get better at what you do. Amazing.
And yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. I think from a point of view of, you are the person, you are the business owner, whether you're freelance or running, an agency as a full-time sole trader or a limited company, but you are that driving force. And that's why sometimes, vision boards are really helpful in setting why you're doing it and what the purpose of doing that is. So yeah, great. Thank you for that bit of an introduction. So I think for now, we're going to move on and look at email marketing, the main question of today, and thinking about, how vital it is to businesses. So would you just be able to kind of give a bit of an introduction from your experience, from your mindset around what is email marketing and, why should we use it?
Cool. So ultimately, email marketing is a form of marketing where you collect a subscriber list, a list of people who have opted in to hear from your business or from you as an individual kind of about your work. So people can join that list by kind of signing up to your newsletter on your website, or if you do any kind of like e-commerce stuff, they can opt in during their checkout. That gives you a list of people and a database that you own, which for me is a really fundamental kind of, I think, piece of the conversation that gets missed out of marketing. Is you don't own your Facebook community, you don't own your LinkedIn connections, but your email community you do, and you're in control of that data. And then, so if you're building out an email marketing program, whether as a freelancer or an agency or a limited company, it's around looking at how you can use email to move people on a customer journey from stranger to a customer to a fan, so that they then go on to promote you and your services to someone else. But so it's like there's a sales element there, but it's also for me it's a really strong brand building tool, because as I mentioned earlier, that kind of propensity for storytelling, that you can really bring people along a journey and start to kind of position yourself as an expert, whether that's by sharing like industry topics or news, or even something else that you like isn't directly related to your work, but feeds into how you run your business, for example.
And when you put it that way, it sounds very simplistic in, that it's a process, there's steps. But for somebody who, doesn't have that experience within email marketing or running their own business before, honestly, it could probably be a little bit daunting. How do you start? So from kind of your experience and advising other new businesses or new other companies, where would you start with that? So what would be the pivotal foundations to setting a really good email marketing strategy?
I'd say like the number one thing, and before kind of the tactical execution, there's a little bit of mindset there of don't wait till you think you're big enough to set up an email list or an email community. Make kind of writing a newsletter or collecting that information something that you do from the very beginning, and take people on that kind of journey, because I think it's the sooner you start growing that list, right, the better position you'll be in for email. But in terms of kind of how to practically do it, you need to find kind of like an ESP or an email marketing kind of platform that works for you and create an account. I'd say really good free ones are MailChimp, MailerLite, Campaign Monitor, and it's literally free. Go on, set up an account. I think a lot of them, it's like the first 500 subscribers are free. And all of them have kind of a built-in functionality where they either call it like a form or a landing page. So you don't even need a separate website. And you can create a landing page that then basically lets people fill in their name and their email address, and they can join your email list. So it's up to you to kind of promote your email community and that sign-up form on your social media. So that's where, for me, kind of having like a multi-channel marketing mix is really important, because they all kind of feed into each other.
And I think that, that process, again, sounds really simple, and the fact that actually there's steps to it which, might align with a lot of people kind of listening to this conversation. But obviously the email marketing on the flip side has seen some negative press from, how many emails we get now, and, do they fall into our junk? So we'll get into storytelling in a little bit, just because you've already picked on it a couple of times. But what mistakes can new businesses make when they're putting their marketing together that, maybe go into your junk, or it makes it easy for people to delete straight away?
Absolutely. I'd say like the biggest mistake, and therefore kind of like room for improvement, is an automated welcome email. So after someone fills in that form, basically when someone goes to sign up to join your email community or sign up for your newsletter, like they're really excited to be there, and they want to learn from you, and they want to find out what you do and how they can work with you. And often, so people sign up and they hear nothing. Like they hear nothing until we're ready to send them a next newsletter or a sales email or a product launch or whatever it might be. And so they forget about us. And so when we do eventually pop up in their inboxes, like, and we've all done it, you kind of like look at your screen and you're like, who is that? Like, did I ever like actually subscribe to them? So make sure that you're sending an automated welcome email that just says hi, who you are, who your business is, what you do, and more or less how often people can expect to hear from you. And I think that does a lot in helping kind of you build good email like hygiene and deliverability, which is basically just an annoying jargon-filled way of saying making sure that your emails actually land in inboxes and don't go to spam. Because weirdly, so our inboxes have algorithms like social too. We just don't really talk about them in the same way. And so if, let's say, you're sending loads of emails and hardly anyone opens them, that tells Gmail and Outlook people don't really value the emails that come from you. And so that's how you end up in spam, or people don't see your emails at all. So I think kind of the best way to kind of make sure that doesn't happen is regularly clean your list. So once you've built it up a little bit, it's going in every couple of months and saying who's unsubscribed, who hasn't opened my emails in a while, and either give them a chance to kind of re-engage, so win them back, or it's actually just better to delete them, because it's like hanging on to dead weight. It's better to kind of keep a really active and engaged group of people. And then, like, I think sometimes like content planning can be made way overcomplicated, and it's just about getting out a piece of paper and going, right, where are like the key moments for our business, or for me as a freelancer throughout the year? When do I want to have kind of, when am I launching a product or peak sales, and kind of plot your emails around that, so that you can see kind of a full picture of how many emails people are going to get a year. And I think we have a much higher threshold for the number of emails we expect from people. But I think as long as you don't take the mick and send absolutely loads, I think it's just about kind of keeping that kind of steady level of communication, and that's what keeps you in inboxes.
And when you talk about that steady inbox, obviously with social media, there tends to be that kind of saying around, you don't necessarily have to post 3 times a day or 5 times a day, which a lot of people think's the rule. It's more just about being consistent. Is there any rules with email marketing, whether it's, engaging with your audience 3 times a week or twice a day? How does it work, or is there kind of a golden rule or not?
It's a bit of a tricky conversation, actually, in that if you're really into kind of like the technical side around email deliverability, a lot of consultants or agencies will say you need to be sending like 2 to 3 emails a week. I think that's not always the right thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, it might not be sustainable for you or your team. And if you make a plan that you know you're not going to stick to, that's what makes kind of the whole thing fall by the wayside a little bit. But also it's who's your community? What do their days look like? How do they use their phones or their laptops? When are they checking emails? How much information do they kind of want in one go? And that has to be what drives how often you email people. I would say at a minimum, like do an email a month, because like a really good email open rate is between kind of 30 and 40%. So if even your most engaged people are only hearing from you 5 times a year, think about having like any kind of relationship with people. That's if I had to like only speak to you twice a year and then go, right, Adam, I've got this like amazing offer for you and I really want you to buy it and work with you. You'd be like, I don't really know who you are. Like, I feel like you're coming on a little bit strong. And so that's kind of how we need to keep that actual kind of customer experience in mind when we are planning and creating those emails. Perfect.
And another question just off what you insight you give into, how it works with the algorithms, is you mentioned, a lot of emails tend to be from Hotmail, Gmail, anything, Yahoo back in the day. Is for a new freelancing business, is the recommended that they have their own email address, or is it just as powerful when you're doing email marketing campaigns to use the likes of a Gmail or a Hotmail?
I would say that if you can, it's always better to have your own URL. So even if you don't have a website, and like when I first started, I didn't really know what my business was going to be. So I just bought my name as a domain, and I felt like that was a really good starting point, or kind of a version of. So if you can, buy a domain, so that helps keep you kind of out of spam filters. But if you're not there yet, I'd say that it's better to just start and use whatever email address you have. I would say that depending on the platform that you use, some email marketing platforms don't let you put in a kind of a Gmail or a Hotmail address. So it's just a little bit of trial and error. But I think in terms of like investments that you can make initially for your business or being a freelancer that aren't mega expensive, it's kind of find a domain that you might stick with,
of course,
for a little while.
Great. And I kind of support that. And you don't know how quick your business might grow, and if you've got a brand or a name that you're happy to stay with, instead of rebranding and changing that eventually when, because let's be honest, customers know us as our first name. If you change it, they'll be like, oh, what were they called? So definitely, that's great. So kind of in regards to the social media versus email marketing, kind of you touched on it in the very start about, we don't own our communities and databases through social, but why is it important to use social media and digital marketing as a collective, as a combination rather than individually?
For me, I think social is one of the easiest ways to grow your email community. And the way that I always like to think about it is, like, you've got all of your friends, and that's social, and your company page or whatever it might be. And your email is almost like, it's like your close friends. It's a special place to be, because often it's where you share exclusive offers, longer kind of insights or things that you might not share on other places, whether it's because it's not supported, like a tweet length, or because people aren't going to read like an essay on LinkedIn. So you need both, because they feed into each other and they help the other grow. But I think because social is seen as so much easier to do, it becomes 80% of what we focus on in kind of our marketing mix.
Perfect. And where does storytelling come into that? So obviously when you're using, and we could talk about storytelling as a whole different subject, but within email marketing, within kind of linking that to your wider community using socials, is there any kind of tips that you could give around where storytelling comes into email marketing?
When we say the word newsletter, we think of an email that has like loads of little bits of stories in and loads of things to click. And sometimes that works, but a lot of the time it doesn't. And I think when you go, I need to send a weekly or a monthly email, you only see one format in your mind's eye, and I think it puts people off. And instead, if we move to a more kind of like a storytelling model where it's, whether if you're just starting out, tell people about like the behind the scenes. What challenges have you overcome? What things are you trying to figure out? Or if you're like working in a co-working space, like a recent conversation that you had with someone that kind of gave you that little light bulb moment, that's all storytelling. And I think when you weave that into email, it becomes a really powerful way to kind of foster connection and community, because it ultimately kind of feels like you're receiving a letter from a friend. And I always tell people, like, lead with letter. Imagine, like, embody a period drama version of yourself where like you're sat at a desk, and put that much kind of emotion and story into it. And that's when you'll really start to see kind of the return on investment on email.
Perfect. And going from, we've talked about email marketing, how it's linked to social, obviously kind of being mindful of those algorithms, but then about storytelling too. Is there an example from, a brand out in a well-known brand, or one that you've worked with, without giving too much away, where you've thought they've cracked this is exactly how every business should do it? If you could bottle it up, it would be sold for millions. Is there an example that you can give where there's a really good method of that?
And actually, I think that a lot of solo business owners and freelancers are doing email really well. And a lot of them have moved to a kind of a weekly email model. So they're not always very long. And again, it's linking to stuff that you're working on right now, client stories, transformation, things that are going on with you. I think if you're a freelancer as well, or a solo business owner, who you are as a person and your personal brand is such an important part of how you generate business, and people like sharing what you're up to, what you're going through, what you're thinking in those kind of weekly emails, I think are doing really well. So I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I would say kind of like go onto LinkedIn, go on Twitter, and have a look at who's kind of pushing those newsletters. And then for me, like obviously it's not in this sector, but non-profit wise, Solar Aid are doing really, really well. And I think there's something that we can all learn from them, in that they little updates that probably their internal teams didn't think were really important make some of the best newsletters, because you kind of feel like you're part of them and their mission. And I think it's no different if you're a business or a freelancer. And it's great to tell people, so that thing that I talked to you about 3 months ago, so like it's just come to fruition, it's just launched, this is what we learned. Like people thrive off that kind of content. And I think, obviously, we want our email list and our community to exist to help us generate income. And those storytelling pieces, like I said before, like they build that relationship. And so when you do come to tell people how they can work with you when you're launching or selling something, they're ready because they feel like, well, they know you and they're part of your business and your journey. And I think that's why it does so well.
Amazing. And I guess for me, on the other side of that, on the other side of the fence, around when you start a business, when it's new and you're kind of, let's just say kind of going through the different steps about finding out who you are, sometimes it can be quite hard to be vulnerable and kind of showing, what the challenges are, like you said before, what mistakes you've made. For somebody who feels that they can't share that, what would be your little tip or advice on why they should do that?
So MailChimp has their own magazine for creatives and freelancers. It's called Courier, and it's really, really good. And in their most recent issue. I can't remember who they interviewed, but they said something around, there's only one of you, and that's what, in a sea full of businesses, people you can partner with, by letting that part of yourself out even just a little bit. And you can have boundaries with the internet. You don't have to share everything. I think it's what makes you unique. And then also, for me, like practically, sometimes it can feel really overwhelming to write those emails initially in MailChimp or MailerLite or whatever platform you use. So write them in a Google Doc, or often I use Otter and I go for a walk and I just chat and it transcribes it, and I feel like it takes the pressure off a little bit, and you're less worried about it being perfect or too formal, because I think email has this, again, like I think because we use it for one-on-one stuff, and it can be quite formal. When we do our email marketing, sometimes that can creep in a bit and kind of squash our authentic voices. So yeah, write them in different places. And then also, like, this is from an amazing public speaker called Kirsty Holtz. She has this thing where she says, "Wince and send." Sometimes you just have to be like, okay, and put it out into the world and schedule it, and that's it. And it can, sometimes that nervousness, that fear of being vulnerable, like, it's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. But if we can learn to kind of push through it and share stories with people, I think we'll build stronger communities and stronger businesses as a result.
I love that, the Winston method. I use one, and it's from We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon, which is a really random film. But there's that 10 seconds of bravery where actually you count to 10 and you've done what you wanted to do and it's went horribly wrong. You can just go and leave. And I think sometimes it's that within freelance and within setting up a new business, you don't want to put yourself out there because you feel vulnerable, because it's about you personally. Sell some New Balance trainers or a range of other trainers and you think, yeah, okay, I can learn about that. But when it's you and you're selling your services, we all have that imposter syndrome, I guess, in a way. Perfect. So I think for me, we could talk for hours about the range that we've been through today. These are just starting conversations. So what I would like to do now is just finish our conversation with some quick fire questions, which we call the freelancer questions. So for you, thinking about more from a general freelancer point of view, what would be your 3 top tips you would give to someone who started off as a freelancer?
Get a separate bank account. It doesn't have to be a special sole trader or a business bank account, but just for me, knowing that all of my tax money and everything else is in somewhere completely separate, and what I use to look after myself and personally live somewhere else has been really, really helpful. Find a business friend, like a business pal, because I think when you're starting out and you're alone, for me, like, one of the things that I found really hard was not having someone to bounce ideas off of, or just to go, I don't know if this is the right thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I just needed to tell someone. And I think the sooner you find that person that you can just chat with, I think it takes it from being a venture that you're doing on your own to something where it's an experience that you're sharing with someone else. And then, like, just start your newsletter. Like, don't wait. I waited. I didn't take my own advice that I give other people, because, again, it's that imposter syndrome thing. And I had that little bit of, like, who am I? Who am I to share what I'm doing? Who am I to take up space? And the sooner you start that, the stronger kind of position you put yourself and your business in.
Perfect. 3 amazing tips. I definitely agree with the first one around separate bank account. It causes so many issues later down if you don't. And thinking back, so if you think that's back to when you started your journey, or even further back when you started your career, what would be the one tip you would give your younger self that you wish you would have known back then?
Oh, spell check. No. Linking back to when we were talking about how when you work on stuff that you really enjoy and you can, like, be really passionate, and taking a moment to just, like, step away, have a cup of tea, go for a walk, ask someone else, and then come back with a little fresh set of eyes. No one gets mad, but I think you just, when you're first starting out, like, you're so eager and you're so keen, and I think we can learn a lot from just, like, taking a moment.
Awesome. I think that there's that kind of takes me on to my next question, which is around, you've mentioned some great software and tools, and for me, definitely going to check out Otter, because I think transcribing your thoughts is a really important tool. But with all the softwares and tools that are out there at the minute, thinking about email marketing, thinking about freelancing, what would be your top tip on a software or tool that freelancers should use? My business couldn't function without Trello. And so it's finding like a project management tool that works for you. So I create a monthly board for myself, and then I also create boards for clients. So it becomes a really easy way for us to manage and communicate. And I think also by finding a project management tool, it stops those awfully long email threads that get stuck in our inboxes. And I think what that does by moving it is it frees up your email inbox to learn from other businesses and people, and it kind of turns it into an exciting or a curious and an inspirational space. Again, Otter, really big fan. And then I'd also actually say kind of like upgrading, if you can, to kind of use Google's like Workspace, because it does everything, your email, your calendar, and then it's all kind of interconnected. And I think using loads of different tools and being in loads of different places, like there is a mental drag on that, kind of managing it, never mind kind of the cost. So I'd always say to people, map out what you need, and if there's a way that you can find like an umbrella, kind of, I don't know, fleet is the wrong word, like a collection of software, then I think it really helps you scale and kind of get kind of data insight as well. And then, in terms of email, I think, MailChimp or MailerLite, or if you're more kind of a creative like agency, Flowdesk is also really good. And it's just have a little play. They all have free accounts. I think especially when you're starting out, have a look at like the interface of what these tools are. Go and create multiple accounts and see what works for you and your brain. And because when you pick something that you gel with, you're more likely to kind of consistently show up and to create and share and use the tools essentially. Amazing. I love that. Constantly show up. That's a really good way to put it. And going on kind of, so taking that on around recommendations, and I'm going to stay on the path of kind of learning. But is there when you're thinking about, freelancing, starting up a business, or just kind of your growth mindset, is there a book or a podcast that you would recommend that, if nobody's read it or heard it before, they should be listening to that or reading?
Well, it's quite tricky. I think, so marketing, Alice Benham, she has a really, really good podcast, and she shares loads of free resources as well. And she really simplifies strategy, which I think is so important, because you don't just kind of like fling yourself into the doing. And then book-wise, Creative Confidence by two, I don't know if they're brothers, but they founded IDEO, which do a lot of kind of human design and thinking out of Stanford. So it's all about how you can kind of get better with trying and failing and being more creative, because they firmly believe that we're all creative. We just need a little bit of confidence to get there. And then anything kind of Seth Godin related books as well. And I think his thinking spans so beyond kind of marketing. And I think it really helps you think about business in kind of a more holistic way. Perfect. Great selection of things to get into and look at. And my final question of the quickfire questions to you is, from your experience, from your opinion, why should somebody start a freelance business? Number one, you'll learn things about yourself, and you're so much braver and creative and any adjective that you can kind of put in there than you think that you are. And also I think the flexibility, I love that I can build a business that fits around my life, that where I work different hours in the summer because I want to go and walk my dog at 2:00 in the sun, and travel away and kind of go home and work from home. And I think for me, it's meant that I really enjoy what I do, because my business and my life kind of like exist to support each other, and they're not in conflict. And I would also say, I think when we think about being a freelancer, like you're not on your own. And I think what's amazing about being a freelancer is that you can partner with other people depending on the project. You can build teams. I love that I can sometimes partner with a social strategist or a designer, and together we can create the perfect team and the skill set for the project at hand, which means that, like, I think customer experience and satisfaction is really high. And again, linking it all back to kind of that like passion and fulfillment. It's amazing when you wrap up a project and you go like, I made this happen, and I partnered with other people who want to be their own boss, who want to work in a different way, and we helped a business achieve and do something great.
Perfect. A really nice way to end it. And, thank you so much for your time. And as I said, I think we could have went on for hours about email marketing, but I really appreciate you kind of giving us your insight from your career. Where do people find out about Maybe Later? So where can, if people want to have a look, where are you?
So I'm on all of the social at Alexandra Fearon, but the best way to find me is if you go maybelater.uk/newsletter, and I send out a newsletter every 2 weeks, and it's all around kind of helping freelancers and purpose-led businesses basically send emails that aren't boring and will help them change the world. So yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate it. So that's the end of today's episode. If you are a student or graduate of Teesside University and you are really interested in being inspired to become a freelancer, if you can contact Launchpad through Teesside University, and why not start the conversation today. So thanks very much for listening.